Banditos, welcome to a Friday episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits, where as always, we fling open the doors of your local comic book shop and we talk to your favorite comic book creators of yesterday and today. But before we get to the awesomeness that is the Dollar Bin Bandits, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Joe Marcello.
I'm Warren Phillips.
I'm Mike Farah.
And today we're bringing you another fabulous interview. We're bringing you a guest who is just like us. He's a collector, but he made his career on YouTube as a collector, collecting omnibuses. And what is an omnibus? It's those big ass graphic novels. Okay. It's the ultimate versions of the graphic novel. I have a few of them, not many. They're very expensive. But our guest today, the Uncanny Omar, has made it his career on YouTube. And the channel is called Near Mint Condition.
Omar is sort of living the dream that we would love to have. I mean, this is his gig. And Marvel, DC, other companies, they send guests his way. They give him updates on when new omnibuses are coming out, which is such an awesome thing that they look to him as the guy to get the word out. And he's such a cool guy. It was so nice to have him on. He truly enjoys what he's doing, and he's so knowledgeable about comics as well.
I missed this interview, unfortunately. Would have loved to talk to Omar, but I'm glad Oren and Joe had the chance to. And like you guys said, I mean, living the dream, right? I mean, just getting bunches of comics all bound together, sent to you, being able to review them, talk to the creators, and put out videos. So what's not to like? So let's get to it. This is Omar from Near Mint Condition.
And today we are joined by someone who has a particular skill set. He is an expert of all things graphic novels and omnibuses. As you could see behind him, he really has no shortage of books. We're talking to none other than... well, we can always all use more. We're talking to Uncanny Omar from the Near Mint Condition web series. How are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you doing, Joe and Oren? Thanks for having me on.
It is our pleasure. We love talking to people like ourselves, you know, talking to those people who collect all things comics. And you have you specialize in basically the graphic novels and all that it entails. I'll start off with the kind of like a different version of the same question we ask everyone. And that's basically how you discovered comics, but also how you discovered graphic novels.
Sure. I think I share this in common with a lot of folks. I was in, well, this part probably not, but I'm originally from Lima, Peru. And when I was 5 years old, I ended up in the children's hospital. That to have surgery on me, and my uncle sent me a care package of comics, and they were all in English, and I could not read English. So I just carried them around with me, and he would from time to time send me packages from the United States and I would always ask for comics, and started getting comics down there, like the things that we had in Peru that were translated from English to Spanish. And then when we moved to America in '87, I was just amazed that these are the stories that I was being sent down there. And it started making more and more sense that they were coming out monthly and then bi-monthly. So it was really cool to get to see that firsthand. Now, fast forward some time, and I gave up on comics around 1996. I just we went separate ways. We didn't see eye to eye anymore. So we had a breakup. And then in 2002, I started coming back to comics. And when I did, I noticed that I had missed, even though it was only like 6 years worth of stories, just a lot. I mean, especially if you were following the monthlies, and then I wanted to see some of what the independent folks were up to. So I started checking out the collected editions, the trade paperbacks that were collecting 6 issues, 5 issues to 6 issues of storylines that I had missed. Now, back, when I was getting comics in the 80s and 90s, there weren't really that. Graphic novel was a term we only used for things like X-Men God Loves, Man Kills, like things that went directly to that graphic novel format. But yeah, in the early aughts, that term started changing. That's when I kind of fell in love with more and more collected editions. And then by 2004, I just said goodbye to singles and started trade waiting, because they were just collecting it. They were doing such an amazing job of collecting everything like every 6 months. I was just 6 months behind. And that's kind of how I got started on that. And 2004 was the introduction of the omnibus editions. Was it 2003 maybe? I think the tryout one was in 2003. But by 2004, that's when they started coming out with more and more. And then DC started having their own, and that's all she wrote. Yeah, that's it. And here I am.
So you decided, okay, which, first of all, I agree. I mean, the graphic novels have certainly evolved over the years. I mean, originally they were just like, just collected editions. Like the first one I bought was like the Death of Superman and, Funeral for a Friend stuff. And it was just basically the issues bound together, really nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
And then over the years, it appears like they've kind of evolved. They're hardcovers, different artwork, expanded artwork. At what point did you say, I'm going to turn this into a podcast, or I'm going to turn this into a web series?
That took a little bit. I had a podcast back in 2005 to 2008 with my girlfriend, then fiance, now wife, and a friend of mine, actually 2 friends of mine, and that was a lot of fun. But people got married, people got kids, so we kind of put a pause to that. And then in 2016, I thought about bringing back a panel type of show, but instead of doing podcast, I thought, well, let's do YouTube. And that's when I started doing my own thing too, like not just the panel show, but also showcasing the omnis or collections that I had on my shelves. And part of the reason I wanted to do that was because I wasn't seeing a lot of that out there on YouTube. Like something that I think drew a lot of people to my channel was the reading orders, because that's what I had trouble with when I first started getting back into comics, was the naming of the trade paperbacks. And since we didn't have back then, in between the time that I missed in 96 to 2002, even though there weren't that many collections of, I'll just use Superman as an example, there were still some trades of Superman comics out there, like Our Worlds at War, but it didn't have a number on it. So in my head, I had to start putting things together in chronological order. And that's kind of how I started doing the reading orders, because it was a video series that would have helped me a ton years ago when I first started. Now they make it easier now, like with the Marvel Epic collections that started, oh my goodness, 10 years ago. That's wonderful because they have a volume number on the back. But from time to time, they still don't. I mean, every time they relaunch a line, it's a brand new number 1. So it gets really confusing, not just for single issue people, but also trade waiters. Like, oh, when did you start scratching your head? When does this particular story take place? Is it before, after this point in the story of Ghost Rider, or is this before or after a crossover? Oh, that's kind of how I got. People started finding that really useful and started asking for my advice, and then that kind of just kept growing and growing.
Say it's pretty awesome that Joe and I are dads as well, and with your channel, you said your wife, but also your kids are comic fans too, and you're able to do that all together. How wonderful is that it's a total family affair?
Well, okay, it's beautiful, but sometimes I do have to round up the kids, because the kids are like, oh, I'm like, we got to do it because it's fresh on your mind. You just read that Mighty Marvel Masterwork. Let's go downstairs and record. Because I have a teenager and one that just went into middle school. So while it is great, they do. As a matter of fact, my oldest daughter was upstairs reading, she was reading a graphic novel right before I came down here. So that's really cool to see that. And honestly, I like to think that it did help with their vocabulary and reading, because both of them are advanced readers and both of them are wonderful writers. So I like to think in some way reading those old Silver Age comics really did help them out.
Yeah. And also it's changed a lot because, Scholastic and Paper Cuts and all those publishing companies are putting out books and graphic novels geared towards younger readers to get them involved. How important do you think that is to get young folks involved in comics altogether?
The Scholastic Fair?
Or the Scholastic graphic novels or Paper Cuts graphic novels?
I think it's great. I mean, sometimes the young generation is what's keeping some of these publishers afloat because of the book market. Like, people compare the numbers of direct market sales from some of these publishers, like Dark Horse, for example, but they kill it in the book market with books that we don't even talk about as comic collectors, right? Like we talk about Superman, and even if we're talking about Dark Horse, we're talking about Hellboy, we're talking about Usagi Yojimbo or Berserk. We don't ever talk about Avatar, and that outsells a lot of that stuff. Avatar: The Last Airbender, to clarify. It's the stuff that's geared towards kids that's just killing it, like, because we don't see the numbers coming in from the book market. We just see the numbers coming in from the direct market. So it's like a small portion. But books like that, or what's the other one I was just thinking about? Like the Star Wars adventure books. And they have a couple of other licenses. It's what's really pushing some of these publishers to stay afloat, kind of balancing it out.
So, in your opinion, what do you think makes a good, like a real standout or really good graphic novel or an omnibus? Something that's worth spending, the 80, $90 sometimes.
That's discounted.
Yeah. Wait on Amazon for a little while.
Yeah, that's discounted. Yeah. I have always been a fan of extras when I still collect physical media because it's such a dying form, but I don't care. I love physical movies and physical video games. And if it's something I really like, I want the special edition or the limited edition, whatever 4K or Blu-ray it is, or video game. And I love extras. Like, that's the whole reason why I get some of these things. Some the things that are not available in the normal edition and the standard edition, sorry. And I feel like that's what I really enjoy about these particular collections. Mapping is very important to me because I do reading orders, and I think a reading experience really can be made or broken if the omnibus or big edition is not properly mapped. And I think that's very important. The build of the book, of course, too. That goes a long way. Making sure that these books don't fall apart. I think we've come a really long way, though, from those days of like bad DC books that were just had so much glue, and we used to call them the old rat traps because they would just snap shut. I think the only thing that's left that hasn't been reprinted was Hawkman by Jeff Johns from that era. But I think they finally figured out exactly a good balance of how to put a book together that's that big. Because I think they were looking at European albums to get ideas like this. I know that when I interviewed Dan Didio, that's kind of like the idea of the Absolute Edition came from what they were doing in Europe with a lot of those books, the prestige format. So right. Extras, the build of the book, and honestly, I like them thick. I love thick books. Big, beautiful, bold letters up there. Collecting some of my favorite stories from the past or some of the ones that I haven't even read.
So let me ask you, what are some of your favorites?
Omnis or just collected?
Either, just graphic novels or omnis that they're just, you think really kind of hit it out of the park.
Yeah, some of these stories I've only read in collected editions formats. So Strangers in Paradise, Mouse, Uncanny X-Men, Omnibus Volume 3. I've read that tons of times, but that's just happened to collect my favorite stories. Infinite Crisis, Gotham Central, and the Image. I like when Image takes chances and does like really unique books. Like, what is it that they did? The Battle Chasers slipcase edition. That was really cool. They don't really do that, but the Rick Remender series, those are awesome. Like the big library editions. Those are some of my favorite type of books. Just big books like that. The Power Rangers hardcovers from Boom Studios. I like
those
a
are
lot.
amazing. I love those.
I wasn't even a fan of Power Rangers growing up. I think I was in high school when they were starting here in America, but I always had a soft spot in my heart for Ultraman and Ultra 7. So it kind of I like giant robots, but I read the comic just because that's what happened. I was in Vegas. I was working in Vegas, and I went to a comic shop and I started looking through the book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like a fifth of the book is nothing but extras. It has
That's
all
great.
the covers in here, all the variant covers, who drew the variant covers. So that's why I picked it up.
Are there any that you feel fell short?
Yes. Yes, of course. um the mapping, like I'm not a fan of mapping like what they did with the original Spider-Verse hardcover. Because that was just putting trade paperbacks together, putting a hardcover on it, and then shipping it out. Like that, to me, that did a disservice to fans, unfortunately. But they redeemed themselves by doing the omnibus edition of Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon with the proper mapping. That was wonderful. I did not like the Flashpoint omnibus because the idea to me of an omnibus is not to recreate the monthly issues. If I wanted to get monthly issues and read them in the order that they were coming out, I would get monthly comics. The idea of an omnibus to me is giving me the experience of the book by thinking about where to properly put these issues. So the issue with the Flashpoint is that I know what they were thinking. In between like Flashpoint 1 and 2, they had like 5 comics.
Mm-hmm.
And then in between Flashpoint, I'm not exaggerating, 3 and 4, they had 17 comics of like Wonder Woman Flashpoint number 3, Aquaman Flashpoint number 3. And some of those had taken place in the past in the world of Flashpoint. So by the time you're reading issue 3, you get to issue 4, you're like, what happened? You see, you have to go back. I don't mind. Like I do. I really like when events, and I know that not every event can be easy to map. I understand that. But there's some things that need to go in between. That's cool. But 17 issues, all they were doing was just pretty much mapping it the way that the issues were coming out on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. So that's how they were putting it together. And I did not like that. Like Infinite Crisis to me is perfection. I love the way that Infinite Crisis was mapped because it's a big event and it only had like 2 issues that you really needed in between.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the other stuff before, after. That was perfect.
Now, do you collect any actual regular issues?
No. No. I don't know why it took so long to answer, because I was trying to think like I may buy a comic or two. I think my wife buys more single issues than I do on a yearly basis. It's when she goes to it's when she goes to a convention and she's like, I want to get a single issue. And in my head, I'm like, why? It's going to be out in trade paperback in like a month or 2. But there is that. She likes the covers. But there's a certain excitement about getting single issues too. And yeah, that's what I was going to say. Oh my gosh, I would break because some of these covers are just absolutely stunning.
Right.
I don't have anywhere to put them anyway. But no, I don't really collect them. I keep the ones that my viewers sent me. Or if I'm not giving, like sometimes publishers send me single issues with a bunch of variants and I end up giving all the variants with the one that I like away. So, but as far as collecting, no, not really.
So do you, all right. So I'm guilty of buying only for one series, but the issue, the graphic novel, the omnibus, which is behind me, and the digital copy. I realize how stupid all that sounds.
No.
Have you
Look what's behind me.
Well,
I have the same thing.
So I bought
trade paperback.
I teed that up just to be curious if you've done something similar, because I bought the Blackest Night series when it was happening and it came out.
Mhm.
And those books are all packed away in their boxes and somewhere in the closet. Then the graphic novels came out, and I was like, oh, this is great. So because I keep reading that story. And then I discovered, oh, what? Digital comics? I just press a button and it appears on my iPad. Oh, so I don't need to do that anymore. It's right there. But
Convenience.
then all of a sudden, dumbass that I am, I discovered, oh, there's an omnibus of Blackest Night. And it's everything. And then it's huge, and there's all this cool artwork and all these like sides from Jeff Johns and all that sort of thing. I hope I'm not the only person who's done that. Have you ever done anything similar?
Yes,
Okay, good.
a lot. But it has to be something I really enjoy, right? Like it has to
Right.
be something that I love. And I don't know if it's subconsciously like something might happen to my omnibus, something might happen to my trade paperback, or I'm like, oh, I'll just take it in trade paperback if I'm traveling. I don't know why. Like I think X-Men. So maybe I justify it by saying, well, I'm a collected editions channel. What if I want to do an overview of the Epic collections? And so I have it in omnibus format. I have the single issues because I still kept, that's like the only thing I kept just about. I've got some of the epics. I've given 90% of my epics away as far as X-Men. I've got the box set, and I've got the Masterworks.
I don't see a problem with any of
I
that.
mean, I do, but no, not really. I mean,
Okay, good.
like it's just if I've got the space, sure. Maybe
Right. I see space on that bottom shelf there. There's plenty of room for other stuff.
There's always room for more.
All right, good.
Like I've got this where I can just push these back and others come. Yeah, I got it for a while anyway. But these books take a lot of space. These big books take a lot of space.
What's your opinion of what the comic industry right now is doing right and what it can really be doing better?
I really think there's a connection with like corporate synergy. When these movies come out, that's when, I don't know why, but omnis sell better if it's a character that's like in the movie. Doesn't matter that it's somebody walking out of the movie theater, because this never happens, right? Going, I feel like I need to spend $100 on a book that's going to collect the adventures of these characters I just saw in the big screen. It's more of like people that are already getting comics going and trying to find these stories that they like. Whatever it is, it just keeps happening. And I kind of wish that this is what I don't think they're doing right. I don't know why the movies and the comics are so separate. Like I think James Gunn is doing something really cool. If y'all saw the Flash trailer, I don't know, it doesn't matter how you feel about the movie, but at the end of the Flash trailer, it was, you can find these stories within the pages of these books, and it was an ad for the graphic novels, a Flashpoint, Flash by Jeff Johns. I can't remember the other book. I think it was Wade. And I was like, damn, that's what I've been wanting to see. Like, why not these multi-million, billion-dollar movies sometimes? The reason they're there is because of the stories found through these pages, and why not get maybe even like 1% of the people that go and watch these movies to come and read these stories? That would be awesome. MCU never does anything like that. I think when they first started before the Disney buyout, they were doing like, I remember going to the movie theater and they had like Avengers comics set up afterwards, but they kind of stopped. And I don't know if that had something to do with Disney, and they're like, nope, we need to keep things separate. But I wish it was more connection. I'm not talking about like connected, like I need my Wolverine to look like Hugh Jackman, nothing like that. I'm talking about like get the people to watch the movies to go and check out the comics. I think Garth Ennis was, because I asked him how he felt about The Boys, and he said, well, the point of that is just to get people to buy the books. That's the point of The Boys show. That's the way he sees it.
Yeah.
And what they're doing right, well, like I said, James Gunn, I think, has a good start on that. I think sharing that kind of stuff and love for comics. People hate variant covers. People hate them. Like, my viewers aren't the biggest fans of them, but I don't have viewers really that still get single issues. But variant covers are sometimes the reason some of these comic book stores are still with us.
Are there still that many variant covers out there? I mean,
Red Sonja has almost 100.
Wow.
like Red Sonja #1.
All right.
Yeah, seriously. And I know it sounds silly, but some of these stores are like staying afloat because of variant covers. Like, I'm not a fan of them either, but I understand, if they're able to sell one of these 1 in 100 or 1 in 200 variant covers, it pays for the lot of books that they ended up getting that to get that 1 in 100. And I think that's really cool because they got it. I worked at a comic book store in the 90s, and the guy that owned it, my gosh, I don't care who made fun of him, but he survived through the worst time of owning a comic book store, selling Pogs, selling Beanie Babies, Matchbox cars, I got NASCAR like models, Magic cards, but the guy was always ahead of the game. Like, I don't know what it was about Steve that he was like, he knew when to get out of Pogs before anybody else did. He was like, oh, time to get rid of these. But whatever it was to survive, and that's kind of what you see these days is comic book stores, not just comic book stores, right? They're also selling like anime statues or figures or Magic cards, Pokemon cards, whatever it takes to stay afloat. I don't think people go into and open up comic book stores to get rich these days. I don't think.
It's not to sell comics.
I
I mean, I joke, but it's true. I mean, there's, I don't know if you guys have the chain out there, but Newberry Comics is, kind of on the East Coast. And the one closest to me is in a mall. And yes, it is called Newberry Comics, but you walk in and the comics are way in the back in the corner. And to the right, to the left, that section is all Funko Pops.
Yeah.
To the right is all like T-shirts and all kinds of other
records, CDs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like records are a new thing. Like, oh my god, when did these come out? Like, dude, it's the Black Album. It came out in '92. Like.
But
I mean, I bought it. But,
if you look at GameStops, right? GameStops are the same way. EB Games, like GameStops are now a wall full of pops and T-shirts, and then some video games. Whatever it takes is what a lot of these places are doing. But honestly, you guys have been around for a while too, because you talked about your first trade and stuff. You see it come back, no matter what.
Oh yeah, I mean,
you always see it come back. Comics, like, oh my gosh, one of the biggest things people love, like they just freaking discovered plutonium or something, is telling me that manga is outselling comics. So some of my viewers always like reminding me that manga is outselling comics. And yes, I know. I'm reminded every week. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of the channels that are out there, talking about the destruction of comics and how we'll never bounce back. But I mean, it's always been like this. Manga was outselling comics back in the early aughts as well. That didn't help Tokyo Pop from filing bankruptcy and going under. They were the #1 best-selling manga publisher. And now it's print on demand. I mean, things just swing. That pendulum's constantly swinging, and comics will be back. And I mean, ever since I was a kid coming to a comic book store here in America, it's always been the end of times with the older generation talking about the comics that were coming out at that time. And keep in mind, that's late 80s, early 90s, which to some people is regarded as the best time for comics. And these, these older gentlemen that had read comics in the 60s and 70s were like, this is what they're doing with comics. This is the worst time to be reading comics. Yeah. I can't believe you kids are reading that junk. And it's funny that it's still happening, but now it's my generation, like people in their 40s talking about to these kids, I can't believe what they're doing to Spider-Man. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to Spider-Man.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I hear what you're saying and I agree with it, but I get really frustrated when people of different generations badmouth the newer generation's stuff, because it's always someone's first. You know, like people who read in the Silver Age were bad mouthing everything that happened in the 90s because like, oh, I don't like what they're doing here and here. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? That's what introduced us or me to comics. And this was special to me. Like, you have no right, preaching because people did it to you. And it really goes for anything else. I think comics now are in a bit of a renaissance, certainly in terms of content, because there's something for everyone. I mean, quite literally, anyone and everyone, depending on race, creed, culture, however you identify, there is something for you, and there's something for anyone to really glom onto and really enjoy. So, I mean, besides, look at behind you. All that costs money for these corporations to create and print. They would not be doing so if people weren't buying them.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about that is I get to see, whenever I announce a book for Marvel, I get to see all the comments, and I keep quiet. I know better than to get in the middle of people arguing. But it is really funny to me how when I announce a Silver Age book, right? I'm like, Iron Man Volume 1 is being reprinted. You have the older generation, usually, right? Maybe a couple young cats here and there. They're like, yeah, it's about time. The younger generation, usually, it's griping like, I can't believe they're doing this. Why would they even do this? This is just gonna go on clearance. I announced something new, like I don't know, Gwenpool or something.
Mm-hmm.
Younger generation, usually, like, yeah, it's about time. This is great. The older generation, usually, I can't believe they're printing this. This is junk. Comics, they should focus on the old stuff. And I'm in the middle, like, it's funny how just both.
Yeah, print it all, man. Print it all.
It's exactly
old,
the
new.
same kind of argument. And but I get it, right? If I like only X-Men, I would be like, where's my X-Men? What's going on? Like, where's the next X-Men omnibus coming out? This is ridiculous. We got 3 Spider-Man omnibus and 1 X-Men. Yeah,
there's no shortage of X-Men content out there. I mean,
no, we have.
I will say that I think a lot of people are a bit satiated with X stuff.
Yeah, that's always been me. That's always been me. Even when I couldn't read the thing in English because I didn't know the language, but that was me.
Well, let me ask you guys a question, because I mean, we're all the same age, and we remember, like you said, late 80s, early 90s, X-Force #1 coming out or Youngblood coming out, and we're all lined up, people we didn't know, but lined up to get into the comic shop to get issue #1 and get home and read it. And it was that shared excitement among the comic community to be part of all this. Do you think that sort of thing will ever be back again?
I think about that kind of stuff happening again. I don't know. I guess in the same way, will we ever have another Game of Thrones? Remember Game of Thrones parties? Game of Thrones bars? Bars would like get you to come on Sunday night to watch Game of Thrones with a bunch of strangers, drink. That was awesome. Will that ever happen again? Can it happen with the streaming services and all that? I don't know. I feel like I mean, I miss those times. I miss the excitement, but now it's like I don't even know. Do they still have midnight release for video games? You could just be at your home and download them now.
Yeah.
Right. I used to love going to midnight release of like a console or video. Well, I guess for consoles, they still have to, maybe. But like video games, midnight release, just be there with a bunch of strangers looking forward to the next Final Fantasy, whatever it was. And now it's like, oh, I can just sit at home and download it. Like, do I really need to go out? Comes out at midnight. I don't know if we're getting more disconnected, if it's got something to say about,
it's all Amazon's fault.
Yeah. Not just the internet, but it's the convenience of things. And just a generation. It could have been just a generational thing too. Maybe kids nowadays don't like doing things like that, or maybe they'll find their own first few issues of Image Comics to.
Kids nowadays have been brought up on and this is just me on a soapbox, but it's just kids nowadays, our kids and maybe a little bit older, have been brought up on the immediacy of everything. You can download a game, you can order on Amazon, it's here the next day. It's that. So they can watch a whole series and power through it in a day or 2 days. So having, I think shows like Ted Lasso and Disney, how they went back to the more episodic release, every week, is great in that sense because you have something to look forward to. Like I remember talking to Oren, like, oh, well, we have coming up, Secret Invasion, or, the new Mandalorian is coming out. That's cool. Like, you don't really have that too often because now, like, Hulu or Netflix will just, here's the entire series. And you watch the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, what do I have to look forward to now on TV? Like, you don't, everything is there immediately for you. And, like, okay, the new Who's Who or Volume 2 is coming out. I can click it on Amazon and it's here tomorrow. Like, I don't have to go to the store and get it. And it's on sale, by the way, on Amazon.
Well, I think you're right. Instant gratification, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm guilty of that too.
Hell yeah, I'm guilty. I don't want to lazy. Wait. I'm tired. I'm an old man.
But it's not just even old people. It's everybody. It's kids too. They don't want to wait. I mean, look at a lot of these kids were raised on what was it? Vine videos, right? Vine videos are what? 6 seconds, 8. That means if somebody didn't get your attention, not in 5 seconds, in 2 seconds, they're gonna keep going, scrolling. That's nuts, man. Yeah. That's nuts. Like, instant gratification, and we need things now, as fast as possible. So maybe, it could have been a generational thing, and we lived through some magical times, or maybe we will be looked upon as a bunch of idiots that waited around in lines for absolutely no reason for Youngblood #1 and Brigade #1.
You waited for the phone to come out? What the hell?
One thing I'm seeing now is, like, I'm a big John Sable freelance fan, and through crowdfunding and Kickstarters, you're seeing some of these independent books and independent series get the money together to put out these omnibuses, these collected editions. How important do you think that is to have this kind of crowdfunding platform now to get some of these stories out there to a larger audience?
Even that's changing, because it used to be Mike Grell, right? Like the Mike Grells. Hey, I used to make comics. I still have the rights to this. I'm gonna make a crowd, like, that makes sense.
Right.
But now it's like, Boom, who's like, hey, a Power Ranger book that everybody likes that's out of print. Well, now you can crowdfund it. I'm like, well, that's not that fair. Like, you're a big, you're not a huge publisher, right? I'm not like, Boom isn't like 1,000 people working at Boom, but still, that seems like, if you reprint this and just put it out there, people will buy it. You don't need things like crowdfunding for that. To me, crowdfunding is for lesser known creators or lesser known books. Like Mike Grell's book. Like, how many people are going to line up for that if somebody like Dark Horse were going to publish it, right? Even in a limited run. I think crowdfunding was, what's that?
Oren totally would.
Okay, that's one person. That's
just one guy. I mean.
me, I would be all over his Warlord, though. I would be all over his Warlord. But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I think crowdfunding should be used for. But now it's like companies like, and the problem with something like that happening is they did it with Giant Days. They did it with Irredeemable and Incorruptible. And then other publishers are going to see that too and move that route. Like, I don't mind, like, actually Giant Days, cool. That's awesome, because not a lot of people knew about those books. And it finishes out the set. That makes sense. Lesser known creators, lesser known books. But Mark Waid on a hardcover, and you're telling me you needed a crowdfunding for a Mark Waid like a hardcover of one of his best works? No. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't mind like Vault Comics doing crowdfunding for some of those lesser known creators and lesser known books. Or if Dark Horse were to do a crowdfund on some other more obscure titles that people have been asking to put in hardcover format to kind of get, test the waters, that makes sense. But things like Power Rangers and Mark Waid just absolutely do not make any sense to me. Like, why that even needs to be crowdfunded.
So let me ask, what are suggestions for our listeners, our viewers, perhaps yours that are watching this, for those, maybe some Easter eggs or some real gems that people are not aware of in terms of graphic novels or omnibuses that are out there that they should, look out for?
Well, Joe, you're in luck because every month I do a segment called Hidden Gems.
Well, damn it, let's get into it.
Yeah, that's honestly, that kind of came with necessity being the mother of invention, right? For some reason, about 3 years ago, I was feeling pretty stupid and decided I'm gonna make a video every day and see what happens. And my channel just kept growing, and now I'm doing a video every day. And let me tell you, even doing it for a living is crazy. Doing a video every day, but that's okay. That's what my viewers are used to, and I don't mind. Keeps me on my toes. One day, but it used to be like I come to my basement, I'm like, oh, what am I gonna do? I'll do a overview of George Perez's Wonder Woman, sure. But then it got to the point where one day I just came downstairs and I'm like, really don't want to talk about X-Men anymore for a while. So I looked at my shelf and I'm like, oh, I never talk about this book and I really like it. So I grabbed 5 books, and that's kind of how that segment started. And I was like, hey, I'm going to talk about these 5 books that I don't hear enough people talk about. And it's been really cool because like a lot of my viewers love that stuff, because not that they're done with superheroes or they're done with horror comics or whatever, but just that they need a break from time to time, a little palate cleanser. And yeah, Lake of Fire is one of my favorite ones. I love that book. Like, and it's never been released in hardcover, and I have viewers that are only hardcover collectors, and more power to them. But I feel like you're missing out on so much if you're just getting hardcovers. It's only been released in trade paperback. It's not even out of print, but just no one talks about it. It's such an awesome story. Like, it could totally be made into a movie. So I'm a big fan of that one. And let me see. But what's really cool is that if I look back at the years of doing that, sometimes these books eventually come out in a hardcover format. Like, they found popularity afterwards. Like, people have been reading them word of mouth. Word of mouth still does a lot of things, especially in the social media age. I remember putting things like Weatherman in there, and they went on to do Ice Cream Man, which is a wonderful series. Coda, which got its own hardcover now. But even obscure titles like from Marvel that did a couple things, like Marvel Boy by Grant Morrison. I never hear really anybody talk about that series. Some DC stuff in there from time to time, but mostly it's like Dark Horse, Image, Vault Comics, or Boom. I did like the last one I did. What did it have? Boom's Devolution. It's by Rick Remender. That's a really solid title. And Rick Remender, I mean, you say that name and most people are like, oh yeah, it's the guy that did Uncanny X-Force, or he's the guy that did the 7 to Eternity or Deadly Class. Yeah, but this little book that was published by Dynamite, just nobody had heard of, really, or not a lot of people had heard of. Donny Cates, like I was a big fan of the Redneck. That's a good book. And I'm trying to think of it's hard to go back and think about my favorite ones though. Because I think sometimes when I think of hidden gems now, some other folks have been talking about things. But now Hidden Gems has, I try to get in some crowdfunding books from people that have tried to kickstart their books or Indiegogo their books in there from time to time. Give them some love.
That's really cool. Those are all good suggestions. Anything by Donny Cates, I absolutely love.
Yeah.
When the crossover series was...
I haven't read that yet. How is it?
If you like Donny Cates, you will absolutely love this, because everything kind of comes together from other series that he's done. Not blatantly, and it's not meant as any major crossover, but there are crossovers from other pieces of his work. Either, just as little Easter eggs or as like a kind of a big like plot twist, things like that. So it's really cool.
Huh. Okay. Like his independent own stuff, because I love God Country.
Yes, and God Country does play a part in crossover too.
All right.
Definitely worth
check it out.
Yeah, definitely worth checking it out.
I still love his Baby Teeth. I'm hoping that big collection comes out one day.
Yeah, I start so I will say that's the one thing I really enjoy about the digital stuff is that they really kind of, if you like this, then check this stuff out.
Oh, so they kind
uh,
of put you
Yeah,
on that.
yeah. So, the man is keeping an eye on what I'm reading, and but the man does make good suggestions occasionally, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, it's cool because I've just kind of veered away from the usual, DC Marvel stuff, which I enjoy, but there's so much other great content out there that's not, the big two. So
Yeah, that's what production companies are going and tapping now. Like it's no longer the big two.
yeah, I mean, like I've mentioned this and I've joked about it in the past, but
Mhm.
if there is a series out there, old, new, what have you, I would not be surprised if at some point or another someone has not created a treatment for the big screen for it, whether it's some version of I don't some DC Marvel property that we have not, like Ambush Bug, someone
Quasar.
has yeah, Quasar. I'm sure John Sable, there's a version of John Sable floating
There
around
was a
out there
TV show.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
there you go. Boom.
It's me dropping knowledge.
He was on
Thank
top
you.
of that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Warren was on top of that.
I was waiting. She got it right in my scope. I was ready.
That was
He
his
found
chance.
he found the VHS in some bootleg store.
Yeah. In a dollar bin.
So that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
So before we go, where can our listeners find your show, and what can we look forward to coming up on your future episodes?
I'm on YouTube, Near Mint Condition. That's the name of my channel. We're on social media as Near Mint Con. We do have a TikTok. That's what the kids watching. That's
so you dance and do all that stuff?
Maybe somebody's made a video of me dancing. It wasn't me. I can cut a rug, but I'm not dancing for no camera. And I put out daily videos. Yeah. So I've got some more upcoming news from Marvel. I've got some hardcover overviews, absolute overviews, omnibus overviews, and I do a weekly review show with my wonderful co-host Amanda on Wednesdays, just talking about like the comic book based movies. Sometimes I join my buddy Maddie on Old Reader, New Reader. She does that every week, where used to be me would go back and reread something, and the new readers would read something for the first time, and we talk about it. That was a lot of fun. That was kind of my way of getting books off my shelf to read them and not just buy them. That was was kind of my little idea that I was like, oh, I think I need to read this. I'll just start a segment where I have to read this again.
That's really
cool. Justifying my purchase is what I was doing.
I don't see a problem with that either. I mean, that's what we do with our wives. This is research. Don't you understand it? And we are back. I love talking to Omar. It was really cool. Love talking to our guests and the creators of comics, but I like talking to people like us to get their take on the state of comics, being a collector, kind of where the comic book industry is headed. And it's so cool. He's got to make his career on YouTube basically just buying really big comics, or for that matter, having them sent to him. So yeah, this was fun.
Omnibuses, I remember them just starting out a bit, and then they've really sort of taken off. I think folks nowadays, instead of wanting to buy the individual issues, they want to get it all together in one shot. And it's sort of, maybe it's the trend of the future for comics. We'll have to see. But Omar's definitely tip of the spear when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, some of these things, I don't even know what they weigh, but they are huge. They collect whole runs of some of these titles, and we're gonna have to start or continue in some cases. Joe's case, I'm looking at working out to really be able to lift these things so that we can read them. But yeah, Omar does a spectacular job in reviewing them and good miming there, Joe.
Thank you.
And so we wish him all the best in continuing to do that. And, we'd love to get to where he is someday. But that'll do it for this episode. One last reminder, though, for tomorrow, November 18th, we are promoting Huracan. So that is the convention that benefits the Bethany Church, which is at 100 Main Street in East Rockaway, and that's where the convention is going to be held on November 18th, 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. Go check it out. You may see some flyers or other merchandise with the Dollar Bin Bandits logo on it, so please check that out. And we hope you have a great weekend. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.